Okay, in the second part of the chapter, they first start teaching us how to use the fill handle. Yay! About time. When I read this, my first response, why didn't you tell me about that in Unit 1? Because a lot of formulas to copy, that would have saved me a little bit of time. Not a bunch. Control-C, Control-Paste. But here I just drag. So what they want us to do is go to make a new column called calories burned and fill that in. So going over here. And up at the top, you need a calories burned here. And then I simply want to copy the formulas from here to there. So I highlight them all, use the fill handle, and drag them over. Easy. And then get rid of the decimal places, and you know how to do all that. So that we've already seen. But then they start talking about another feature which is really handy, and that's filling a series. You can fill a series of values, and this is kind of I think it's an underused feature of Excel. Instead of these numbers that they have here, they want us to use dates instead. Because the day number doesn't mean much if I want to talk to Daniel about the fact that he did an exercise on day 4. What does that mean? So instead, let's put in a date here, 8/1/2016. Looking into the future, this is the exercising that Daniel's going to do, I guess. But now, another handy-dandy feature of the fill handle is it can fill a series. If you fill this January or August 1st, excuse me, if you fill this August 1st, you might expect that the next cell, the next cell, the next cell, the next cell will all have August 1st in it. But Excel is smart enough to recognize that that's a date. And if you're filling down, you probably want the date to go up. And notice the little tooltip that pops up said, hey, look, the dates are going up. Cool. Very underutilized. This may not be the best example because in a little while they're going to make us change them again. But it does demonstrate one kind of series fill that you can do. Now I don't want you to follow, I just want to show you this. I'm going to a new worksheet here, and what happens if I type the word Jan in there? You might think that's your best friend's name, but Excel thinks that's a month name, and notice what happens when it gets to the end. It says, I know that December is the last month, and if you're still going, you must want to repeat it. Sure enough, I can use the full name, January, and fill it. You can use days of the week. It recognizes those. You can even make your own patterns if you wish. That's beyond the scope of this course. It's in the intermediate course to learn how to make your own pattern. Like I have a spreadsheet that works with the 4 different mid-state campuses. And so I created a campus pattern that has Stevens Point, Wisconsin Rapids, Marshfield, Adams. And all I have to do is type in Stevens Point and drag it, and it fills the rest in for me. And I can do it over and over and over again. You can create any kind of pattern. So let's do this. 1 and then a 2. If you just do the 1 and I fill it down, notice it's just giving me a bunch of 1s. If you just copy a number, it just gives you copies of that number. Thanks, but no thanks. If you go the other direction and you give it a pattern, it'll fill using that pattern. This is the pattern. They're off by 1, so now it fills with the pattern. But you have to give it 2 so it can recognize the pattern. That's not true. They're lying to you in the book again. Here's a power tip. If you hold the control key down, now I haven't tried this on a Mac, so this might not work exactly right the first time, but it will. If I hold the control key down and drag, I didn't have to give it a pattern. It just starts counting by 1. Okay, so that's a tip that's not in the book. What if I want to count by 5s? Give it a pattern. Counts by 5s. count by quarters. You can count by whatever you want. And it even knows other things, like if I put in here QTR1, that's an accounting thing, right? And if I drag that down, I get 2, 3, and I'm going to get quarter number 5, right? Oh no, it's smarter than that. And so those are really neat. They can save you some typing time. That's all, but it can be very helpful. So let's take a quick look back at the book to see if there's any other patterns I missed. Digits, we just saw that, but they don't tell you about hold down the control key to do a pattern of 1. Dates and times, if you type the dates, doesn't matter how you type them, first period, second period, third period, fourth period. If you're a hockey fan, Chris isn't in here, but if you're a hockey fan, it doesn't know that there's only 3 quarters or 3 periods in a hockey game. It just keeps right on going. But it does know about quarters and quarters. So I did cover all of those, I think, including it takes times too, if you wish. Type in a time and then drag and it'll go from there. So that can be pretty handy. We've already used it to fill that stuff. One little tricky thing, though, that I didn't know about till I read this chapter, because it hasn't been here before, is what if Daniel's one of those like me, he only exercises on weekdays? Well, then this pattern thing isn't going to work very good because it just goes one day at a time. Now I could give it a pattern of 6 and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then skip a couple of days. And if I copy that, then it should fill. But there's an easier way. So I'm going to click on this first cell. And there's a fill button over here that has some options that we didn't have using just drag. So I'm going to drop that down and choose series. And it says, what kind of thing you're working with? I'm working with days. No, I want to work with weekdays only. I don't exercise on weekends. Working with dates. Notice there's others, linear and growth, but mostly it's dates, weekdays, step by 1. And click on OK. And then fill it down again. And I must have done that wrong. So now that I've done the fill, let's follow the book here. F22, did that, drag the fill handle. Select the whole range, so you've got to fill it first, that's painful. And then use the fill tool to say, give me just weekdays. And now it adjusts them, and notice it went from 5 to 8, from 12 to 15. It's skipping the weekends. And notice now we hit to the end of the month. That's why there were only 23 days there. So the painful part of that is you have to fill it first with single values and then select them and go back to fill and say, never mind, let's make that weekdays. So that's a little tricky. I still thought it was pretty cool that you could do that. There are some date functions. We talk about them more than use them in the book, so let's take a quick look. Here's the date functions. You can create a date. I don't use that very often. In my intermediate class, we create some really convoluted formula and use that. You can find out what day this is. You can find out what month the date is. Weekdays, this we're going to use. Okay. And there's also a function called today. It allows you to insert the current date. So every time you open this worksheet, it's got the current date in it. Kind of did that with the header and footer where we inserted the date code. That one's called print date. But you can also put that same thing inside your worksheet. I think that's what they're going to make us do next. Yep. Okay, so go to G2. Current date. And simply type, I'm going to type it because it's in the book. The function is called today equals T, O, there it is, done. I think you have to press tab to fill all that in. And we already know, and by the way, the test doesn't like it when you do this. We already know you can just press enter and Excel will fill in the closing parenthesis. If you do that on the test, it'll go wrong. Stupid test. It makes you type that closing parenthesis. If we open this workbook tomorrow, it'll say the 14th. If we open it a year from now, it'll say 2015. That formula takes a look at the current clock in your computer and says what day it is. That's how all those date functions work, by the way. They don't know what day it is. They don't call some almighty power. Your computer has a clock in it that keeps track of what day it is. That's why you can see it down here in the corner. It references that, that's all. So if you mess that date up, and that can be done. If you mess that date up, you can go back in time, go forward in time, and all your spreadsheets will pretend like they were done on a different day. Doesn't work with email though. When you send it to me, I still know what day it is. And that's supposed to be a calculated style. I'm not doing it anymore. The users of the spreadsheet have decided, you know, what if we want to use this for next month? Well, then I got to come down here and I got to type, let's use the other mouse. I got to come in here and I got to type 9-1 and then I got to fill it and then I have to go to the fill series and I have to change that to workday. What a pain. I'd like to make this a little easier. All right. So what they want you to do is come up here to G7 and say, when did I start working out? August 1st on the 16th of 2016. Okay, type. And then what they want is for this to automatically update. So if I change this to September, and we will, this will automatically update. And it will figure out all of the weekdays. To do that, you can't use the fill, you have to use a formula instead. In G8, that's here, we're supposed to put equals F44. F44, which one's that? That one at the end of this list. I hope there's only 23 weekdays in a month or this kind of has issues. But that's pretty good. So it figured it out. How did we get that date down there? By using our fill. But now they're going to ask us to change things. I'm going to go to F22. And in there, we're going to say whatever the start date was up above. Sorry, my mouse has a sideward scroll, and every now and then it gets a little funky on me here. Whatever this date was, I want it down here. It's easy to copy the value of one cell into another. You just press an equal sign and then click on it. And now it copies it. So if I change this one changes automatically. And now they want us to use a formula, not a fill, but a formula to figure out what's the next workday. So we're going to use a workday function, and they suggest that, what do they suggest? F44, F22 equals G7, did that. Insert function. Okay, we're going to look it up. Click. And I want to find a function that works with working days. I'm guessing it's called workday. There it is, work days. It's not, it's workday. There's an international one. Let's not go there. Click on OK. And now it wants to know, where do you start? I start in the cell up above. And I add one workday, is what that means. And now we're going to copy this formula all the way down. So notice right now, there's the answer. What? Well, you might remember all the way back to Excel 1 that I said behind the scenes, dates are stored as numbers since the dawn of time. So whatever that day is 42,582 days in the future from the dawn of time. And it's a work day. Did they have work days at dawn of time? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Let's get on with it here. And now, let's copy that. So we fill this one down, all the way down to the bottom. We get the same answers, yes, but now they're flexible. If I come up here and change the start date to 9/1/16, notice once it's been formatted, you don't have to type the whole year. It puts it in for me, and now it starts on 1, and it says, oh, that must have been a Thursday, Friday, and there's the next work day. Automatically updates, which the fill wouldn't do. Fill series is great if you have a fixed list of values, like the months, January through December. It's great for that. But if you want this to be a little more dynamic, so I can change this date to this month, still works. and it automatically updates itself, which is really cool. All right, now we're supposed to put this back to 8/1/2016. I hope. How about that? Skipped over all that stuff. Still works. Copy it. These are now calculated fields, so I would highlight them and turn them into calculated fields. You can do that if you wish. We know how. And I just demonstrated the change the date. Counting. Excel also knows how to count, but there are two different ways to count. There's count function, which is built in. The count function tallies how many cells contain numbers or dates. Because remember, dates we just saw, it looked like 42,767. So those are numbers. They don't count blank cells, and they don't count text. So if you're calculating an average, that's good, because I wouldn't want any text in there. I wouldn't want any of the blanks to count and screw up my average. Count does the same thing. It only counts cells with numbers in them. If you want to count cells that have text in them, then you have to use the count A, which is count alphabetic, or count all is the way I think about it, because it counts text and numbers and dates, everything except empty cells. So we can use that to further develop our spreadsheet. We want to know how many workouts were scheduled. So we're just probably going to count the dates. Let's see what they make me do here. They say in G9, enter a count formula. So I'm going to say equals count, because I know that's what it's called. And I know that all functions have a parenthesis after that, so I'm going to type it. All functions, after you get the name, have a parenthesis. And then we're supposed to select F22 to F44, which are the dates. The count function works good here, sort of. The count function works well because all those dates are filled in. Remember, I don't have to type that closing parenthesis, except on the test. Press enter, and we now have a count. Shows me that I had 23 scheduled. But how many did I work? Well, luckily, I have this little checkbox thing here said you showed up. So in the workouts attended, this one, however, this is text. If I put in a count, you don't have to follow. You go ahead and put count A in there. If I put in a count, I just want to show you. I'm going to count these. Enter. And I get a 0. At least that's what the book said I should get. Yep, there's a 0. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because there's X's there. Why wouldn't it count them? Because count doesn't count X's. So I'm just going to tweak it. Put an A in there. And this is usually the way I do it, by the way. I put in a count, and it doesn't count right, and I go, oh, yeah, I have to use count A. And then it goes, oh, never mind, 17. How many workouts did I miss? That's just math. Equals this one minus that one. 6. Not bad. So that's the count function. It's another one that's built in that has frequent use. Instead of you counting them, and that's a real pain to do, you have Excel count them. Just remember to use the right version of it so that when you're counting text, you use count A. Yes, sir. Did you select these cells, all of them? Or just one? Make sure you select them all. Next kind of function they want to teach us about are the logical functions. And here's where things get a little tricky. Logical functions ask yes or no questions, at least the one they're showing us, the if function. They ask yes or no questions, and if the answer is yes, they calculate one way, and if the answer is no, they calculate a different way. So it allows us to ask questions and modify the results in the same cell, get two different answers based on certain circumstances. So here's an example. It says if whatever's in A1 is the same as B1, then they get 100%, otherwise they get 50%. If whatever's in A is equal to B1, give me what's in C1, otherwise give me what's in C2. So this is what the if function looks like. Some question, yes or no answer. Are they the same? Are they less than? Are they greater than? Notice down here we get some other options. Less than, greater than. If the answer is true, notice there's three parts to this. If the answer is true, do this. If the answer is false, do that. So first the question, then a comma. Then if the answer is true, do this, then another comma. And then what do you do if it's false? Well, geez, I'm never going to remember all that stuff. I got to put commas in, and what goes first, true or false. You're right. Most of that stuff you don't remember. So instead of trying to remember it, use the formula builder or the function builder. Here's some more examples. Forgot about this. If you want to check for text, does A1 have the word yes in it? You have to put quotation marks around it. Programmer's going, I knew that. If you want the results to be just text, you have to put quotation marks around it. There's a special kind of text. Hey, one of you programmers, wake up. What's that thing called? Two quotes right next to each other. The empty string. If you want nothing in a cell, you use two quotes right next to each other with no spaces in between, no nothing, just two quotation marks that says, leave the cell empty. So this says, if we're bigger than the max, or if we're equal to the max, then say maximum, otherwise leave it empty. That's one of the more common uses of if statements. In my intermediate class, I use that a lot, and you'll use it in the homework assignment. Here's another example. If there's an x in G22, then give me the total, otherwise give me nothing. So here's where we're going to do some stuff in K22. Go ahead and move your mouse to K22. I'm going to use an if statement to figure stuff out. What Daniel doesn't like, or what our trainer doesn't like, are these zeros. I didn't show up that day. Why are you calculating a total over here? So there's K25, but you don't just put it in the zero cells, because we might go, oh, he didn't show up that day after all. Take that out. And if we take that out, we want this to disappear. So just like conditional formatting, you don't just put it in one cell, you put it in the whole range, and then let the spreadsheet figure out whether to put numbers in there or whether to put formulas in there, or nothing in there. So here we're going to replace this with a new formula. I'm going to insert a function. K22, yes, I'm in the right spot. And it says delete what's in there. Might not be a bad idea, because if you hit function and there's already something in there, watch what happens. It gives you the sum function. No, 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 I want a different function. Can't. So in this case, you have to actually delete it. Then we can build a new function. If there's already a formula in there, you can't use it, a function in there. You can't use the fx button. I want the if function. Notice one thing. Once you've used these, they're in your recently used list. Unless, of course, you're taking the test, because the test isn't a real Excel spreadsheet, so it doesn't know your recently used list, so you always got to go find them. You might be able to find them here. Logical functions, lookup functions. Let's try this one. Logical functions. Why? Because I said so. That's where the if statements are. We called them logical functions. It's another way to look up functions. Lots of ways to do it. Here's the if function. Click on OK, and here's the function arguments box that shows you all the three parts that you need. First, a question. A yes/no question goes here, the test. What do you do if it's true? What do you do if it's false? So the question is, does G22, I'm going to click on it, equal, now remember we're looking at text here, so we have to put quotes around it, X. And notice off here on the side, it says true. So I type G22 equals, you have to type the X, there's really no way around that. If you're a keyboard aficionado, you press tab and it moves down to the next box. In here, what do we want to do if it's true? calculate the sum that was in there a minute. Oh, geez, I just erased it. Okay, so we type sum parentheses. Can I highlight them? I need the sum of all of these, right? I can't. I'm highlighting them just by dragging. Close the parenthesis. I don't think it'll do it for me here. If you press enter, it's the same as clicking on OK. But what if there isn't an X? Then give me nothing. Quote, quote. Right next to each other. You got to shift. Can't use apostrophes. You have to shift. Two quotes. What do we do if it's false? Now in this example, notice it's already giving me an answer. 35. If you get an error, look closely. Look closely. The first box should say G22 equals quote X quote. Second box should say sum of H22 to J22 with parentheses. And the false box should have two quotation marks. I'm going to try mine. I'm not going to get an error. I can tell because there's already a number here. If you get an unknown or a logical error or a value error, something's wrong. Got to look at your formula, figure out what you did wrong. Now, Ben, I'm coming. Hang on. For the rest of you, I now want to fill that down. So I fill it down, and notice what happens to all the zeros. They disappear. But if I decide, watch what happens real quick here, if I say, you know what, I did show up that day, then it starts the calculations, and I can put my times in, and it automatically replaces nothing with something. I think that's very professional. In the homework, if you decide to do one of the case problems that I assign to you, it has you fill out an order sheet with 10 items. What if I only order 3? All the formulas are empty. They look like they're missing. But as soon as you order something, all the formulas fill in. The if statement says, oh, there's something here now. I better do it. It's cool. It's a very nice feature that helps you make professional looking worksheets. Now, what happened to these? They got all kind of funky on me because we can't do formulas. Ben, did you get it sorted out? Since my zeros disappeared, now this formula doesn't make a lot of sense because it says take what's here and multiply it by P20 and C11 and all the rest of that stuff. So how do we fix that? Volcker term. We wrap an if statement around it. I want to do the same thing here. If there's not an X over here, don't calculate, just give me nothing. But I don't want to retype this formula over and over and over again. So I'm going up here to the top so I can copy it because I want to do it in all the cells. And I'm going to wrap an if statement around this. At the beginning, between the equal sign and the P20, I type if parentheses. Whenever you use a function, even the if function, it's always followed by parentheses. If you can't see the blue one up there, you might look at this one, but even that's kind of hard to see. Then what? If this cell over here, G22, equals an X, same thing we had before. If G22 equals an X, comma, remember there's 3 parts. Here's my question. Is G22 an X? If it is, do this big, huge, ugly formula. There's the other look at it, same thing. There's a comma there. What if it's not? So at the end of this, comma, space, quote, quote. And just to be safe, I'm going to put the parenthesis in, but I'm sure Excel would have given it to me. So once again, this says if G22 has an X in it, do this big, huge, complicated formula thingy that I already tested. If not, give me the empty string. If that went too fast for you, the book does it. Book does exactly the same thing. I call it wrapping an if statement around it. My original formula is still there. I put an if in the front with some kind of a condition, and I put an empty string at the end. If I press enter, that works. Drag it down, and hopefully all my values go away, and now everything works again. So that's using the logical functions. They allow you to ask questions, and if one condition is true, then do this. Otherwise, do something else. Another example that I can't do here, I think that's in my intermediate class. I charge tax for an internet order. When do you charge tax for an internet order? If the person lives in Wisconsin. So I write an if statement. If state, wherever that is, let's say it's in A1, if state equals WI, in quotes, then do some magic calculation for tax. Otherwise, 0 or empty string, either one. So that's another example where you might use if statements, and you'll see some more in the homework assignment. Just to show you that the book did what we did, I'm going to page 175, and right there, they said, go to the beginning and add this. Right there. Go to the beginning and add this. See if there's an X in G22. Then use your arrow keys, or I clicked with my mouse, and type a comma, which is very easy to miss, by the way. Empty string, parentheses. And you get this big, ugly looking formula, but really this is the formula right there. The rest of it just leaves it blank if there's nothing to work with. It's pretty cool. And then we copied it. Next complicated function. I am shocked that they put this in beginning Excel. I've been teaching Microsoft Office for 20 some odd years, and it's never been in beginning Excel. It's a very common topic in intermediate. Doesn't belong here, I don't think. But you got a homework assignment, you might have to deal with it. It's on the test. So we have to figure out what this lookup function says. What a lookup function does is it says, what do you want me to look up? Out here in the far right of our spreadsheet, whoa, not that far right, come back. There it is. We have different workout routines that have different point values. We could, we're not going to, use a lookup function to say, find me the value of workout routine 6 or 9, and it will return the 14. What we're going to instead is, what point value do I get for a sedentary lifestyle, a light exercise lifestyle, and so on. What we're going to do is look up these words. And when we get moderate, we go, oh, that's 1.55. So we're going to do a lookup. This is called a vertical lookup because the values that we're looking for are in a vertical format. There's also a horizontal lookup where they go sideways instead. It's called a vertical lookup. The name of the function is VLookUp, and you have to feed it 4 pieces of information. Oh my goodness. So let's do it. What we wanted to know is, I think it's this one. Which one used the P? Was it P29? I think it was that P8 right there. That's the one we're going to change. Okay. If I change my lifestyle from sedentary to moderate exercise, I would expect this formula to change. But it's not going to, because this formula is always pointing to P8, which is this one, or that one, up there. It's not going to change. Let's prove it. You don't have to follow. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to come up here and say, you know what? I'm doing moderate exercise now. Give me a new BMR. How many calories am I burning per day? Didn't change. Not good. Because our formula is out of date. So I'm going to undo that. And now down here, we're going to put in a new formula where it says P8. Take that out. And actually, we have to take the C21 out as well. To start with, it'll go back. And we're now going to look up this value. Find out what its exercise point value is. Look it up. Where? In that table over there. The table has to exist so I can look it up. So we're going to look that up. Equals V. L. Vertical lookup. VLookUp. Press tab to select that. And it's not giving me a whole lot of help. Underneath, notice it does give me a little bit of help. It says I need a lookup value. Then I need to know where the table is. And then I need a column number. I'll explain that. And then I need this square. What? If you need help, click the FX. There's my friend, the dialog box. Okay. So now, first thing we want to know is, what do you want to look up? This? Whatever's in that cell. Just click on it. Where do you want to look it up? Where's the lookup table? Oh, that's way over here someplace. Ah, there it is. Don't take the titles. Just take the data. 08 to P12. In the book, it asks you to type it, but I wanted to show you the table has to exist. And it has to have your lookup value on the left-hand side. And now Excel wants to know, okay, you're looking up sedentary in this table. Which column's value do you want returned? This is goofy, if you ask me. Excel considers this column 1 and this column 2. So I want column number 2. Whoa. It's not column P. Within the table, which column do you want? So the table could be anywhere. Which column do you want? Column number 2. And then finally, the good news is you don't have to worry about the second part. Lookups can do ranges. If you're between 0 and 25 pounds on your shipping package, you get this much. If you're between 25 and 50, you get this much. If you're between 50 and 100, you get charged this much. It's called a range lookup. We're not doing any range lookups in this unit. So the answer here is it a range lookup? No, you have to put the word false. You have to put that word in there. If you leave it out, and it's optional, notice it's light, so it's optional. If you leave it out, you get true, which is not what we want. We do not want a range lookup. We want an exact lookup. I want you to find the exact value sedentary. And notice what it does. It says that's 1.2. Oh yeah, it is. Cool. So it found it. Click on OK. That's a vertical lookup. Ooh. Now, there's my B. Oh, but I forgot to, at the end of that, I have to still multiply by C21 because that was what was there before. So instead of grabbing P8, we looked up C9, sedentary, what's its multiplication factor, and multiplied by C21. And now we get the same answer we had before. But if I change this to moderate, it updates it. And I get more calories per day because I'm doing moderate exercise. Notice I don't even have to capitalize it right. Still finds it. The light value is supposed to be, I can't even see it because we don't print it anywhere. The light value is different. That's what's important. As I change things, that multiplication factor changes. It's called a vertical lookup. The good news is the book kind of guides you through creating these lookups, and absolutely, positively use the formula box when it pops up. What do you want to look up? Sedentary, where is it? Where's the table? And here's what I think is the tricky part. Which column out of the table, numbering them from left to right, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which column do you want? And finally, we are not doing a range lookup. You're never going to do a range lookup, so you always have to put a false in there. When I say never, I mean this unit. Get to the advanced functions unit in unit 8, which you can't even see, it's the intermediate class. Then you do range lookups. Another classic range lookup. If you get 0 to 60%, that's an F. 60 to 70 is a D, 70 to 80 is a C, and so on. That's a range lookup. Anything in between there, we match. But this is an exact lookup. Look up the exact value. And finally, then I'm done, performing a what-if analysis. Supposedly, in order to be the right weight, you're supposed to have a body mass index of 24.9, which is why I didn't use my numbers, because mine, I did test it, it's a little higher than that. It's very embarrassing, so we're not going to put it in here. But according to our expert, we're supposed to have a body mass index of 24.9. Then you're not overweight. Well, right now we're at 27.7. So Daniel wants to know, well, what weight do I have to be to get that down to 24.9? There's a couple of ways you can do what-if analysis, is what this is called. What if? What if my weight were 183? Then what would my BMI be? Just type it in there and find out. That's the power of spreadsheets, right? Everything updates. Not good enough. Okay, still you're better. It's a better BMI. We would expect that, but not good enough. How about 163? Boy, that's 30 pounds. There you go. Now you're under. Yeah, but it don't have to be 163. How about 165? How about 168? How about 165 and a half? So I can stop dieting and stop eating or start eating again and put all that weight back on and put my BMI back in there. This is one way to do what-if analysis. What if this happened? And this is what a lot of businesses do. What if the cost of gold goes up? What if the number of students goes from 15 to 20? What does that do to my income? What does that do to my profit? What does that do to my costs, etc.? They create these really complicated spreadsheets, and then they change a couple of numbers and see what if. It's called what-if analysis. The newest versions of Excel include something new, at least it's new to me, called goal seek. I have a goal. In this case, Daniel has a goal of exactly 24.9 BMI. You can reverse engineer this in a way and ask Excel, hey, if I need a 24.9 here, what do I have to do to my weight to get there? We can ask those using the goal seek feature. I'm just checking to see here if they tell me to put his weight back to 193. Probably not, but let's just do it anyway. So let's put his weight back to 193 because that's where he started. And now we want to know, okay, when does my BMI make it to 24.9? That's my magic number. We go to the Data tab. If you'd asked me before I reviewed this chapter where this is, I couldn't tell you. It's under What If. Goal Seek. And there's much more you can see here. Scenario managers, data tables, etc. There's a lot more complicated what-if analyses. Goal Seek is relatively simple. We click on it and it says, which cell are we going to change? I'm sorry, which cell do we want to set? I want to set this one. Notice it puts an absolute reference in there because it's going to be doing all kinds of manipulations through my spreadsheet trying to make that fit. So it puts an absolute reference. What value do we want? 24.9. Which cell should we be changing? The weight. What does my weight have to be so that C19 becomes 24.9? That's what we're asking. So we click in here and click on the weight cell and click on OK. And it tells us exactly 173.556 pounds. So somewhere obviously between the 183 and the 163 that we tried, almost exactly in between, but this has told us that that's where you need to be. That's what your weight needs to be as long as your waist size doesn't change, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If I'm losing all this weight, isn't my waist size going to change? Isn't my height going to, maybe not your height, okay, but your neck might change, right? And all those were part of the formula for BMI. Well, then you can start working on those things. What if instead of losing weight, I'm more interested in taking a couple inches off my waist? We could ask the same questions. What does my waist size have to be for my BMI to get down to something reasonable? Click on OK, and it saves that value for you so that you can remember it. And at that point, you can always do an undo and put it back again or type in the actual value, and that's goal seek. Not hard. For me, it's always tricky figuring out which one to set and which one to the word change is what kicks into me. Which one should we change? Okay. Your assignment for tonight is case problem 1, and then a test before Friday. If you're, again, sick of it, you can go home and turn this in to me before, what have I been saying, tomorrow, midnight, roughly. Or I can check it off while you're here, give you your points. Then take a test. I found the test, here's a hint, for those of you who don't like that test. The test is about 50% series fill handle, drag, fill handle, drag, put in two numbers, fill handle, drag. It's about 50% of that. And then an if statement and a logic or a lookup and a count A, one each, and you're done. I didn't think the test was too bad, but there's a couple of those where they don't like you using the box. And my advice, go through the training, find out how they like to do it, and then just follow those instructions when you take the test. Or do case problems 2 and 3 and email them to me before next week's class. Or no, test is Friday, excuse me, before Friday. End of the day. And a couple people did that, and if you get something wrong, I mark them wrong, and you lose points. But in general, Val's happier, right? I hate for you to put that put that in there, because it's harder for me. If you take the exam online, I do nothing but look at your score and go, that's too bad. If you send me case problem 2 and 3, now I got to look at it myself and figure out what you did right, what you did wrong, and figure out how many points to take off. But hey, I got nothing else to do. What the heck? End of recording.